Okay, this is lessons 4 through 5 about photojournalism, telling stories with images, and again, all of this content is from Walsworth Yearbook. So, lesson 4, shutter speeds and stopping action. So, the objectives in this lesson are going to be to learn how shutter speeds are measured and which shutter speeds to use to catch various actions. Here's a quote. My first priority when taking pictures is to achieve a clarity. A good documentary photograph transmits the information of the situation with the utmost fidelity. Achieving it means understanding the nuances of lighting and composition and also remembering to keep the lenses clean and the cameras steady. Should be steady by Sam Abel. Okay. Shutter speeds and stopping action. The amount of time that the shutter remains open, allowing light through the lens to reach the sensor, is the shutter speed. A shutter speed is expressed in fractions of a second. Okay, so there you can see below regular shutter speeds in purple, expressed in fractions of a second, and that's 1/2, quarter, 1/8, etc., etc. Early images required light to pass through the lens for minutes, but modern cameras have fast shutter speeds, generally 1/4000th of a second at the fastest. However, just because a camera has a setting of 1/4000th of a second doesn't mean you can use it on a regular basis. Such a shutter speed would require a lot of light for proper exposure of the image. So that's just a very extreme case example. Each shutter speed is half the next slower shutter speed, letting in half as much light, and twice the next faster shutter speed, letting in twice as much light. So, in other words, shutter speed of 1/250 lets in half as much light as 1/125, and twice as much light as 1/500. So, some rules in general: the slowest shutter speed a person can use is about 1/60th of a second. However, a better guideline is to avoid using shutter speeds slower than the inverse of the focal length of the lens when hand holding the camera. Okay, so that's information right there. Okay, but what does that all mean? For example, with a 200mm lens, to avoid blur, the slowest appropriate shutter speed would be 1/200th of a second. That's 1/250th of a second being the closest to regular shutter speed. Stopping the motion of fast-moving objects requires a faster shutter speed. For example, 1/60th of a second might stop the action of a person sitting at a desk working. The faster the person in the picture is moving, the faster the shutter speed needs to be. With a normal lens, 1/250th of a second will stop a person running at a brisk pace, but it takes a shutter speed of about 1/2000th of a second to stop the blades of a helicopter. Sorry about that for a second. So here are some activities. Lesson 4 activity, practice with shutter speed. So again, we can't really meet up in person for this, but there might be a way where you could see a person running nearby, seeing a person bicycling nearby, or a car even passing, and you might be able to try. Activity 1, practice with speed. Here's another activity. You could search through an online gallery, newspaper, or magazine, and find 2 photos, one illustrating the use of a fast shutter speed and one illustrating the use of a slow shutter speed. Okay. Another activity for lesson 4. You can, if possible, you can take pictures of light in the darkness. You can be creative with that. But now we're on to lesson 5. We're combining 2 lessons for this actual PowerPoint video. Now we're on ISO. The lower the ISO number, the less sensitive the sensor is to light. In low light situations, photographers use higher ISO settings to get faster shutter speeds, but there's a trade-off. Higher ISOs result in noisier or grainier, lower quality pictures. For general shooting, 400 ISO is a good compromise. This will give you some flexibility with faster shutter speeds while resulting in still usable quality images. Here's some guidelines for ISO. Bright sunlight, there's no action, 100 ISO. Bright sunlight with slow action, 200 ISO. Bright sunlight with fast action, 400 ISO. Average light with slow action, about 400 ISO. Low light, slow action, 800 ISO. Low light, fast action, 1600 ISO or faster. Okay. Activity adjusting the ISO, find or create a well-lit scene of people working with a normal lens. Set your camera on program mode to allow the camera to set an appropriate shutter speed and aperture. Then take the same photo at 5 different ISOs. Compare the images, noticing the effects of different ISOs. Print 2 of the images and write the f-stop, shutter speed, ISO, and focal length of the lens on the printout. Compare your results with others. Again, we can't directly, but maybe on a board or project. Depending on the quality of the printer, you may be able to see the results better on the computer screen at extreme magnification.